Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, I'm going to be answering the question, what is the new Commander Power 9? Now I say new because there's actually an episode from last year on the original Commander Power 9. So if you haven't seen that episode, make sure you check out that one first. Also, of course, a couple of big disclaimers before we get into this episode. That episode, as well as this one, are entirely based off of my opinion. A lot of factors go into picking these cards, and your picks might differ, and that's okay. Also, like the previous Power 9, this Power 9 is not taking CEDH into consideration. I personally don't play competitive EDH, and their list might be completely different than mine. Also, one final disclaimer, the cards that are going to be listed in the Power 9 are in no particular order. With all that said, let's jump into it. So first off, in case you're wondering where this entire discussion came from, let's talk about the original Power 9. The original Power 9 included Black Lotus, the 5 Mox with Mox Emerald, Jet, Pearl, Ruby, and Sapphire, and then Ancestral Recall, Time Walk, and Time Twister. Now, although there's no universally agreed upon Power 9 for Commander, this one is universally agreed upon for Magic. These cards are very expensive and incredibly powerful. In fact, they're so powerful that 8 of the 9 are banned in Commander. But now let's quickly go over my Commander Power 9 from last year. Again, if you haven't seen last year's episode on my original Commander Power 9, make sure you check that one out first. So I'm not going to get into a ton of detail on why each of these were selected, but I will give you some high-level reasoning. Sol Ring is an incredibly efficient mana rock to say the least, only costing 1 and tapping for 2. And then Mana Crypt is even more efficient, costing 0 and tapping for 2. It does deal 3 damage to you if you lose a coin flip at your upkeep, but that's a small price to pay. Then there's Guy's Cradle, which can tap for an incredible amount of mana, tapping to add green to your mana pool for each creature you control. Next up, there's Rhystic Study, which says whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1, so in a multiplayer format, this is going to draw you an incredible amount of cards. An even bigger taxing effect comes from Smothering Tithe, which says whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token. 2 is a ton of mana to pay, so this will generate you an absurd amount of temporary ramp. Next up, there's the incredibly efficient Demonic Tutor, which is basically any card in your deck for just 1 and a black. Speaking of efficient, there's Necrophones, which basically lets you pay 1 life to draw a card, and yeah, in Commander, you've got a lot of life to give. Next up, there's Teferi's Protection, which can protect you from basically anything. It says until your next turn, your life total can't change, and you have protection from everything all permanents you control phase out. And finally, there's Cyclonic Rip, the incredibly flexible, one-sided board wipe at instant speed. Now, as great as all these cards are in Commander, they all don't make it into the new Commander Power 9. So since that last episode came out, there's been a ton of new cards to evaluate for the Power 9. I'm going to go over them one at a time from their release dates. So let's start things off with the first new Power 9 candidate, Thassa's Oracle. She's a 1/3 Merfolk Wizard that costs blue. When she enters the battlefield, you look at the top X cards of your library, where X is your devotion to blue. You put up to 1 of them on top of your library and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If X is greater than or equal to the number of cards in your library, you win the game. So Thassa's Oracle is essentially a more reliable and more powerful Laboratory Maniac. Unlike Laboratory Maniac, she wins you the game with an ETB trigger, so she doesn't actually have to be on the field. And although this type of win condition is more common in CDH, it definitely sees play in casual circles as well. It's a win condition that's hard to stop and can be pretty easily achieved. But now let's move on to our next candidate with Deflecting Swat. Deflecting Swat is an instant for 2 and a red, and it says if you control a commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost. You may choose new targets for target spell or ability. So Deflecting Swat is part of a cycle of cards from Commander 2020 that you can essentially cast for free as long as you've got your commander. Typically, commander decks are built around their commander and having their commander in play, so generally this is going to be a free spell. And being able to change the target of a spell or ability for free is incredibly powerful. Any kind of targeted removal can be deflected elsewhere. And also, this is basically a free counter spell. If someone tries to counter one of your things, you can just change the target of their counter spell to this spell instead. Being able to do this while you're completely tapped out can be incredibly unexpected and can really turn a game in your favor. So yeah, there's definitely a ton of reasons why Deflecting Swat is a new candidate for the Power 9. But now let's move on to Fierce Guardianship, which is another card from that same cycle. It's an instant for 2 and a blue, and it says if you control a commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost, counter target non-creature spell. So again, just by controlling your commander, you can cast this for free. And having a negate that you can freely cast is incredibly powerful in Commander. The majority of problematic spells in Commander are non-creature spells. This can easily be demonstrated by looking at the difference between Negate and Essence Scatter. Negate, which counters a non-creature spell, sees play in 24% of decks, and Essence Scatter, which counters a creature spell, only sees play in 2% of decks. Again, this can counter a problematic spell out of nowhere even when you're tapped out. So it can be a great way to deal with a combo, or a fantastic way to protect a combo as well. But now it's time for us to move on to the next candidate with Jeweled Lotus. Jeweled Lotus is an artifact that costs 0 and it has tap, sacrifice Jeweled Lotus, add 3 mana of any one color, spend this mana only to cast your commander. So in a way, this is a Black Lotus, which is a banned card in Commander, but only for casting your commander. Still, 3 extra mana that you have access to on turn 1 to get your commander out can give you an insurmountable lead. If you've got a 1 or 2 color commander that costs either 3 or 4 mana, you're going to be able to get them out on turn 1. Yes, this mana is restricted to just helping you cast your commander, but again, many commander decks are built around their commander and actually casting them and getting them into play. That being said, you do need this in your opening hand or in the first few turns to make the biggest impact. But now let's move on to the last new candidate from the past year with Hullbreacher. Hullbreacher is a 3/2 Merfolk Pirate with Flash that costs 2 and a blue. It says if an opponent would draw a card except the first one they draw on each of their draw steps, instead you create a treasure token. So Hullbreacher essentially turns your opponent's extra draws into treasure for you. Even if it didn't have that instead and your opponent still gets a draw but you get a treasure token, that would still be very powerful. But this actually replaces that draw, taking away their card advantage and giving you temporary ramp. In a way, this is kind of like a Narset, Part of the Veils, and Smothering Tithe combined. You can surprise an opponent out of nowhere, turning one of their draw spells into treasure for you. Or if you cast one wheel effect, you basically remove all of your opponent's hands and get a ton of treasure. One thing to mention though is that this effect is on a creature, which is much easier to deal with than, say, an enchantment. But now it's time for the verdict, where I tell you what was added to the Power 9 and what was replaced. We had some amazing candidates, but they all did not make the cut. In actuality, only one made it into the Commander Power 9, and that was Fierce Guardianship. Fierce Guardianship is essentially a free counterspell. There are other free counterspells in Commander that aren't in the Power 9, but those either have higher requirements or bigger downsides. There really is no downside to Fierce Guardianship. It's basically just going to be a free negate the vast majority of the time. And again, in the minority of the time that you don't have your commander, you're just going to be paying 1 extra. Again, this card can counter a problematic spell out of nowhere. It can stop a combo in its tracks or help you enable a combo and protect it. Price aside, pretty much any deck that runs blue is gonna want to run this. Its power truly can't be denied, and that's why it was added into the Commander Power 9. But for Fierce Guardianship to be added in, one card had to go out, and that was Teferi's Protection. Teferi's Protection is a fantastic and incredibly powerful protection spell. Again, it can essentially save you from any situation. That being said, it does cost 3 mana. And Fierce Guardianship can save you from most of those situations as well. It's more flexible, and it can be cast for free. So in my opinion, that's why Fierce Guardianship made it into the Power 9 and edged out Teferi's Protection. Now when it comes to cards that didn't quite make the cut and why they didn't make the cut, let's talk really quickly about Thassa's Oracle, Deflecting Swat, Jeweled Lotus, and Hullbreacher. Thassa's Oracle would probably make the EDH Power 9, but it's not quite there for the casual one. Deflecting Swat is also a fantastic card, but it's much more situational than Fierce Guardianship. Jeweled Lotus is incredibly broken if you've got it on turn 1, but if you don't get it till later in the game, it's basically a dead draw. And Hullbreacher has an incredibly powerful effect, but it is on a creature, which is the easiest type of permanent to remove. But now let's take one last look at the new Commander Power 9. Again, in no particular order, we've got Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Gaia's Cradle, Rhystic Study, Smothering Tithe, Demonic Tutor, Necropotent, Cyclonic Rift, and Fierce Guardianship. In my opinion, these cards stand above all others in Commander. But now it's time for me to hear from you, so in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this new Power 9 are. Do you agree or disagree with some of the picks, and why? Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this new take on the Commander Power 9, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.